I didn't move out to the edge of Red Valley looking to make enemies. Hell, I moved there to disappear. See, after 15 long years in construction litigation, 15 years of stuffy boardrooms, fake handshakes, and million-dollar pissing matches over buildings that never should have been built in the first place, I was done. Completely done. So I did what any burned-out guy in his late 40s would do. I cashed out, packed up, and bought myself 10 acres of dry, quiet land just outside a growing town in Arizona. No neighbors within shouting distance. No traffic noise. No drama. Just me, a modest little house I fixed up myself, and the one thing that made that dusty piece of desert actually worth something. Water. Now, I'm not talking about some picturesque river or a shimmering lake. Nothing like that. What I had was access to a deep underground aquifer. I'd legally tapped into it years back when I first bought the land. Had all the permits, all the rights, everything by the book. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't much to look at. But out here, in this corner of Arizona where the sun bakes everything into submission, that water was reliable. And in a place like this, reliable water means everything. For 2 solid years, life was simple. Peaceful even. I'd wake up with the sun, make my coffee on the porch, watch the desert come alive in the early light. I'd work on small projects around the property, read, think, breathe. No deadlines. No depositions. No clients lying to my face. It was exactly what I needed. Until the day the truck showed up. At first, it was just 1 or 2 big commercial rigs rolling past on the highway, kicking up dust. Didn't think much of it. Happens out here. But then I started noticing survey stakes popping up on the empty stretch of land that bordered mine to the east. Bright orange flags. Marking tape. Then came the graders. The excavators. The concrete trucks. Within a month, that empty piece of desert had turned into a full-blown construction site. A development. A big one. I heard through the grapevine at the local hardware store that it was luxury homes. Some investors from out of state had bought up the land cheap and were planning to flip it fast. Build quick, sell high, get out. The usual game. I kept to myself. Didn't complain about the noise. Didn't ask questions. I've been around enough developments in my career to know how these things go. They roll in fast, make big promises to the county, and cut every corner they think they can get away with. But I figured, live and let live. It's a free country. They do their thing, I do mine. That was my attitude. Right up until the morning, everything changed. I woke up to the sound of metal snapping. It wasn't loud. Wasn't like an explosion or anything. But it was sharp. Wrong. The kind of sound that pulls you out of sleep and gets your heart going before your brain's even caught up. I grabbed my jeans, pulled on my boots, and stepped outside into the early desert air. And that's when I saw it. My fence. The steel wire perimeter fence I'd put up myself 3 years ago, cut wide open. Not torn. Not damaged by weather or some animal. Cut. Clean. Deliberate. Intentional. I stood there for a second, just staring, letting it sink in. Beyond the gap in the fence, I could see fresh tire tracks pressed deep into the dirt. Wide treads. Heavy vehicle. They led straight from the construction site next door, across my property line, and directly toward my well system. My chest tightened. I didn't run. I walked. Steady. Controlled. But my jaw was clenched the whole way. When I got to the well enclosure, my worst suspicion was confirmed. The access panel to my pump system, locked with a simple latch I'd installed, was wide open. Somebody had popped it. Not forced it. Just opened it like they had every right in the world. And the pressure gauge on my main line? Dropping. Fast. I stood there staring at that needle like maybe, just maybe, I was reading it wrong. Like maybe it was a malfunction. A coincidence. But I knew better. Somebody was pulling water. A lot of it. Straight from my system. This wasn't a leak. This wasn't a broken valve. This was theft. I crouched down and looked closer. There were scrape marks on the connectors. Fresh. Recent. Someone had tapped directly into my line. Probably ran a hose or a temporary pump back to their site. I took a long, slow breath. Let the anger settle. Let the old instincts kick in. Because here's the thing. I've dealt with crooked contractors, shady developers, and lying project managers for over a decade. I know how these people think. I know how they operate. And the first rule, when someone's trying to screw you, don't react. Document. So I didn't storm over to the site. Didn't start yelling. Didn't make a scene. I went back inside, grabbed my phone, came back out, and I started recording everything. Photos of the cut fence from multiple angles. Close-ups of the clean cuts in the wire. Video of the tire tracks, narrating the timestamp aloud. A slow pan across the trampled path leading back toward the construction zone. Then I filmed the well enclosure. The open panel. The connectors. The gauge readings. Everything. Timestamped. Geotagged. Saved locally and backed up to the cloud. Then I went back inside, poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and made a call. Not to the cops. Not yet. I called the county records office. Now, most people don't realize this, but public records are a goldmine if you know what you're looking for, especially when it comes to land development. Permits, zoning changes, water rights, utility easements, it's all on file. You just have to ask the right questions. I'd done this 100 times in my old job. So I got someone on the line, gave them the parcel number for the land next to mine, and asked for any permits related to water access or groundwater extraction. 20 minutes later, I had my answer. Nothing. No approved water access. No legal tap into the aquifer. No permits on file for any kind of groundwater usage tied to that site. Which told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just being shady. They were desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. And mistakes, well, mistakes are what I build a whole career on. That afternoon, I decided it was time to pay them a visit. I didn't rush. Didn't gear up for a fight. I just walked across my land, stepped through the gap in my fence, and strolled right onto their construction site like I owned the place. A guy in a neon yellow safety vest spotted me almost immediately. Mid-30s, clean boots, clipboard in hand. Probably a site manager or a project lead. The kind of guy who thinks a vest and a hard hat make him somebody. He started toward me, already pulling that authority card. Hey, sir, this is a restricted area. You can't be here. I didn't stop. Didn't slow down. I know, I said calmly. So is my property. That got his attention. His pace shifted. He wasn't aggressive, but he wasn't friendly either. Look, if this is about the noise or the dust or something, you'll need to contact the main office. We've got all the proper permits and you're pulling water from my well. Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Just a pause. A beat. A calculation happening behind his eyes. And then he smiled. Not a warm smile. Not apologetic. Just smooth. Practiced. That smile told me everything. Sir, he said, his tone slipping into that corporate-friendly register. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. We have full rights to access utilities in this zone. It's all cleared through. No. I interrupted, keeping my voice level. You don't. I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward him. Showed him the footage. The cut fence. The tire tracks. The open panel. The pressure drop. His smile didn't disappear. It just tightened. Got thinner. More calculated. We'll look into it, he said, his tone clipped now. I nodded slowly. I'm sure you will. Then I turned around and walked off the site. No threats. No yelling. No big confrontation. Because this wasn't about making a scene. This was about setting the stage. That night, back at my place, I went out to the well and locked it down completely. Shut off every external access point. Reinforced the panel. Added a new padlock. Even rigged up a motion sensor camera pointed right at the enclosure. If they wanted my water now, they'd have to come back for it. And when they did, I'd be ready. Because this wasn't just about water anymore. This was about principle. About lines you don't cross. About what happens when you assume the quiet guy living alone in the desert is someone you can push around. They picked the wrong guy. And they were about to find out why. The next morning, the construction site next door was louder than it had ever been. Concrete mixers churned and growled like angry machines. Nail guns fired off in rapid bursts, popping like distant fireworks across the job site. Pickup trucks rolled in and out in a steady, dusty parade, kicking up clouds of red dirt that hung in the dry air. But underneath all that noise, all that supposed progress, something else had changed. Something I could see even from my porch. They were struggling. See, water is absolutely everything on a construction site out here in Arizona. You need it for mixing concrete. Can't pour a foundation without it. You need it for dust control, or OSHA comes down on you like a hammer. You need it for compacting soil, cleaning equipment, keeping workers hydrated in 100-degree heat. Without water, progress doesn't just slow down. It stops. And I had just shut off the only easy supply they thought they had. So I sat there on my porch that morning with a fresh cup of coffee, boots propped up on the railing, just watching the chaos unfold on the other side of that fence line. It was better than TV. Around mid-morning, I noticed a small group gathering near the edge of their property. For guys in hard hats, dust on their jeans, work gloves tucked into their belts, and one guy in a clean, pressed white shirt. Sleeves rolled up just enough to look casual, but not enough to actually get dirty. That's the investor type. The money guy. The one who doesn't swing hammers, but signs checks. He was pointing toward my land, his mouth moving fast, his hand gestures sharp and aggressive. The foreman I'd met yesterday, vest guy with the clipboard, stood there taking it, nodding, clearly getting chewed out. At one point, the foreman glanced over toward my house. I didn't wave. I just sipped my coffee. Let them stew. By noon, right around the time the sun started turning the desert into an oven, a white SUV came rolling up my long driveway. Right on schedule. I'd been expecting this. The SUV parked near my porch, and out stepped a tall man in his mid-40s. Expensive sunglasses, tailored shirt, boots that had never seen real dirt. He took his time getting out, adjusting those sunglasses like he was about to close a deal at a country club. "Morning," he called out as he approached, flashing a smooth, practiced smile. I stayed seated in my chair, coffee cup in hand. "Afternoon," I corrected. His smile didn't falter. Guys like this are trained not to flinch. "Right. Afternoon." He stopped a few feet from the porch steps. "My name's Daniel Harper. I'm overseeing the Red Valley Estates project next door." So that's what they were calling it. Red Valley Estates. Luxury living in the middle of bone-dry desert. Ambitious. I'll give them that. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He gestured vaguely toward the fence line. "There seems to have been some confusion regarding water access on the site." Confusion. There's that word again. I set my coffee down slowly. "Your crew cut through my fence and tapped into my well without permission," I said, calm as Sunday morning. "That's not confusion. That's theft." His smile tightened just a fraction. Still there, but thinner now. "We were under the impression the line was inactive. An old system, no longer in use." "It's not." A beat of silence passed between us. He shifted his weight slightly, recalculating. Then he switched gears, softened his voice, went for the reasonable neighbor angle. "Well, regardless of how we got here, we'd like to resolve this in a neighborly way. Our development is going to be a big boost for the area. Rising property values, local jobs, increased commerce. You know how it goes." Oh, I knew how it goes. Developers always talk about the benefits, the jobs, the growth, the community impact. They never talk about the water they steal, the roads they tear up, the shortcuts they take when no one's watching. "So what exactly are you asking for?" I said. He clasped his hands together like we were old friends working something out. "We'd like to purchase temporary water access from you, just until our main infrastructure gets finished and we're tied into the municipal line." There it was. The polite version of what they'd already been doing illegally. "How long are we talking?" I asked. 6 months. Maybe 8, tops. I almost laughed out loud. 6 to 8 months meant their entire build phase, which told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't secured legal water access at all. They'd gambled. Probably thought they could tap into something nearby, fly under the radar, and get their homes framed and sold before anyone noticed. And when that didn't work out, they just decided to take mine. "What's your offer?" I asked. His confidence returned instantly, like he'd been waiting for this part. $50,000. He said it like it was a gift, like I should be grateful, like he was doing me a favor. I leaned back in my chair, looked out over the open desert for a long moment, then slowly shook my head. "No." His face went blank. Just for a second. "No. No." He blinked. Adjusted. Tried again. "All right. 100,000. I stood up from my chair, stretched a little, and looked him dead in the eye. "That won't work either." Now his patience started to crack. Just a little. A tightness around his jaw. "Then name your price." I took a slow breath. Let the moment settle. "You're asking to use the only reliable water source within miles," I said evenly. "For 6 to 8 months. To support a multi-million-dollar housing development that you're selling to out-of-state buyers at a premium." I paused. 100,000 doesn't even come close. His jaw clenched. "Then how much?" I didn't hesitate. 2 million. The silence that followed was absolutely perfect. He just stared at me, like I'd slapped him across the face with a leather glove. "That's ridiculous," he finally said. "No," I replied calmly. "That's accurate." His whole demeanor shifted. The friendly neighbor act evaporated like water on hot asphalt. You really think you can hold up an entire development over a damn well? I shrugged. You already cut my fence to steal from it. So yeah, I think I can. That one landed. Hard. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing a little heavier, fists clenched at his sides. Then he gave a short, bitter laugh and shook his head. You know what? Forget it. He turned and started walking back toward his SUV. We'll solve this another way. I watched him climb in, slam the door, and peel out of my driveway in a cloud of dust and gravel. And I knew exactly what another way meant. Guys like Daniel Harper don't stop when you tell them no. They don't back down. They don't rethink their strategy. They escalate. Which is exactly why I spent the rest of that afternoon preparing. First, I drove into town and picked up 2 more cameras. Not the cheap motion sensor stuff you get at a big box store. I'm talking high-resolution, weatherproof, night vision-capable security cameras with cloud backup. I mounted one along the eastern fence line and another covering the well enclosure from a hidden angle. Then I replaced the section of fence they'd cut with heavy-duty steel posts and reinforced wire. Added a new padlock to the gate. Industrial grade. The kind you need an angle grinder to get through. And finally, I made a call. To someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His name was Marcus. We worked together back in my litigation days. Sharp guy. One of the best construction attorneys I ever knew. He'd since moved into regulatory compliance and land use law, but we'd stayed friendly. Exchanged emails around the holidays. That kind of thing. He picked up on the second ring. Well, he said, his voice warm and amused. The hermit actually uses his phone. Still trying to stay hidden, I said. But someone just made a very expensive mistake. His tone shifted. All business now. I'm listening. I walked him through everything. The stolen water. The cut fence. The illegal tap. The meeting with Harper. The lowball offers. The veiled threat. When I finished, there was a pause on the other end. Then Marcus let out a low whistle. You realize what this means, right? Oh, I know. They built an entire development without securing legal water access. Exactly. And now they're on record trying to buy it from you after being caught stealing it. Yep. Another pause. Then I heard him chuckle softly. Man, this could bankrupt them. I looked out my window toward the half-built houses rising against the desert sky. Wooden frames. Exposed beams. Foundations barely cured. I know, I said quietly. Marcus exhaled. All right. Start documenting everything. Every interaction. Every trespass. Every word. And if they make another move, call me immediately. Will do. And hey, he added, his voice sharper now. Don't let them intimidate you. You've got the law on your side here. All of it. Thanks, Marcus. Anytime. And listen, it's good to hear from you. Even if it's because someone pissed you off. I smiled despite myself. Yeah, good to hear your voice too. We hung up, and I sat there in the quiet of my little house, staring out at the desert as the sun dipped lower. That night, around 2:17 in the morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Motion alert. Fence line camera. I grabbed the phone, swiped it open, and pulled up the live feed. 2 trucks. Dark paint. No logos. Parked just outside my fence. 4 men climbing out. Flashlights. Bolt cutters. I sat up in bed, fully awake now, and watched the screen in silence. They walked straight toward the same section of fence they'd cut before. One of them pointed up at the new camera I'd installed. Too late, buddy. The other guy stepped forward with the bolt cutters, positioned them on the chain, and, snap, the fence gave way. They crossed onto my property. Again, headed straight for the well. And this time, I had everything. Crystal clear video. Timestamps. License plates on both trucks. Faces lit up by their own flashlights. Proof of repeated trespassing. Proof they were still stealing water after being explicitly warned. I closed the camera app and leaned back against my headboard, a strange calm settling over me. Because at that exact moment, Daniel Harper and his Red Valley Estates project didn't know it yet. But their entire development was already dead. By sunrise, I already had everything organized. Every single piece of it. Footage from both nights, clear as day. Faces lit up by their own flashlights. License plates on both trucks captured in crisp detail. Time-stamped records showing exactly when my well's water pressure dropped and how much they'd pulled. And on top of all that, I had copies of the county documents proving beyond any shadow of a doubt that they had zero, absolutely zero, legal right to any water source on or near that property. I compiled it all into a single folder, labeled and indexed, and sent it to Marcus before my first cup of coffee was even finished. He called me back 10 minutes later. "They're done," he said. No hesitation, no doubt in his voice. I took a breath and looked out the window toward the construction site, still quiet in the early light. "Not yet," I said. "But they will be. Because here's the thing. This wasn't just about catching them in the act. Any amateur can catch someone doing something wrong. This was about timing, strategy, knowing when to pull the trigger. You don't destroy a development when it's just starting out, when it's small, when it can pivot or recover. You do it when it's fully exposed, when they've committed everything, when they're too deep to back out. That's when you strike." The first move. Marcus filed the formal complaint within 48 hours. And it wasn't some small-time trespassing report either. He went after them for everything. Illegal resource extraction, property damage, repeated criminal trespassing, commercial liability violations, and the big one, the one that really mattered, fraudulent development practices. Now, most people don't realize what that charge actually means. It's not just about lying on paperwork. It's about building something, selling something, based on resources or rights you don't legally possess. It's about misleading investors, buyers, and municipal authorities. And once that charge gets filed, it doesn't just bring fines. It scares people. It scares investors. It scares lenders. It scares anyone with money tied up in the project. Because nobody wants to be associated with fraud. The second move. We didn't go public right away. That would have been too easy. Too quick. We needed the pressure to build slowly. Quietly. So instead, Marcus sent a formal legal notice directly to their investors. Every single one we could identify through public records and LLC filings. Private equity groups. Silent partners. Out-of-state backers who thought they were funding a safe, profitable desert development. The letter was short. Professional. No emotion. No exaggeration. Just facts. The Red Valley Estates development is currently operating without a lawful water supply and is under active legal investigation for repeated illegal extraction, trespassing, and fraudulent practices. That's it. No threats. No demands. Just a polite heads-up backed by timestamps, video evidence, and county records. And that's all it takes. Because investors don't care about excuses. They care about risk. And we had just made Red Valley Estates a massive liability. The panic. 3 days later, I noticed the change. The construction site next door went quiet. Not completely silent. There were still a few trucks rolling in and out, a few guys standing around. But it was different now. Slower. Hesitant. Tense. No more aggressive expansion. No more concrete pours. No more framing crews working double time to hit deadlines. Just workers standing around in small groups, looking confused, waiting for orders that weren't coming. I drove into town that afternoon to pick up some supplies, and I stopped by the hardware store I always went to. Same guy behind the counter. Local. Been there for 20 years. He saw me walk in and immediately smirked. "You hear about that big development out your way?" he asked, leaning on the counter. I played it cool. Shrugged. "What about it?" He lowered his voice a little, like he was sharing a secret. "Word is the funding's getting shaky. Something about legal trouble. They're saying the whole thing might be in jeopardy." I nodded slowly, keeping my face neutral. "Is that right?" He leaned in closer. "Rumor is, they don't even have water rights. Can you believe that? Built half the damn thing, without securing water." I let out a low whistle, shaking my head like I was just as surprised as he was. "That's rough." "Yeah," he said, grinning now. "Real rough." I paid for my stuff and left. And as I drove back home, I couldn't help but think about how fast news travels in small towns. But in boardrooms? Among investors? Fear travels even faster. The breaking point. A week later, my phone rang. Unknown number. But I had a pretty good idea who it was. I let it ring twice before I answered. "What?" I said. No greeting. No politeness. There was a pause on the other end. Then I heard his voice. Daniel Harper. And he sounded different now. Tight. Strained. Like a man holding on by his fingernails. "You went too far," he said. I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the desert. "No," I said calmly. "You cut my fence." Silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end, trying to stay in control. Then, "We can fix this," he said, his voice urgent now, almost pleading. I almost laughed. Now he wanted to fix it. After everything. After the theft. After the threats. after sending his crew back onto my property in the middle of the night with bolt cutters. Now he wanted to make things right. How? I asked. We'll pay you, he said quickly. More than before. Whatever you want. Just make this go away. Too late. Way too late. This isn't about money anymore, I said. Yes, it is, he snapped, his frustration breaking through. Everything is about money. So just name your damn price. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. No, I said quietly. This is about the fact that you built an entire development based on something you didn't legally have. You gambled. You cut corners. And now you're paying for it. His breathing got heavier. Faster. You're going to ruin hundreds of homes over this, he said, his voice rising. Families. Jobs. You understand that. I didn't flinch. No, I said. You already did that. The moment you decided to steal instead of plan. And that's when I heard it. The exact moment he realized something. I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't posturing. I was finishing it. He hung up without another word. The collapse. 2 weeks later, it happened. First, one investor pulled out. Quietly. No announcement. Just gone. Then another. Then another. Funding froze. Lines of credit got pulled. The money dried up almost overnight. And without money, construction stopped. Completely. The machine sat silent under the brutal Arizona sun. Half-built houses stood like skeletons, exposed and abandoned. Stacks of lumber sat untouched. Bags of concrete hardened in the heat. It looked like a ghost town in the making. And then came the official notice, posted right there on the site entrance. Project suspended pending legal review. That's corporate speak for. It's over. The aftermath. The months that followed were brutal for them. Lawsuits piled up like drifting sand. Not just mine, though mine was the catalyst. Buyers who had already put down deposits on homes started filing claims. Contractors who hadn't been paid in weeks demanded settlements. Suppliers who'd extended credit cut all ties and came after what they were owed. And without legal water rights, there was no path forward. No way to resurrect the project. No investor in their right mind would touch it. Red Valley Estates never recovered. The land sat empty for months. Eventually, it was sold off in pieces at a fraction of what they'd paid for it. A few local developers picked up parcels here and there. New projects started popping up eventually. Smaller. Smarter. And you know what the very first thing those new developers secured was? Water. Legally. The last time I saw him. About 6 months after everything fell apart, I ran into Daniel Harper one last time. Not at the construction site. Not in some lawyer's office. At a gas station just outside of town. I was filling up my truck when I saw him pull in across the pump island. Same white SUV. But it looked older now. Dustier. A little beaten up. He climbed out slowly, and I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. His face looked drawn, tired. The crisp confidence he'd carried before was just gone. Like the desert had pulled something vital out of him and left him hollow. He saw me almost immediately. For a second, just a heartbeat, it looked like he might walk over. Like he might say something. Argue. Blame me. Try one last time to make me the villain in his story. But he didn't. He just stood there by his car, staring at me across the pumps. Then he shook his head. Slowly. Almost sadly. Got back in his SUV. And drove away. I watched him disappear down the highway, dust trailing behind him. And I felt nothing. No victory. No guilt. Just quiet. The fence. I rebuilt my fence after everything settled down. Stronger than before. Steel posts sunk deep. Reinforced wiring that could take a beating. The cameras stayed in place, still recording, still watching. But the truth is, I never really needed them again. Because word spread. Out here in the desert, in these small towns, people talk. Stories get around. And now everyone knew. They knew about the development that collapsed. They knew about the water theft. They knew about the guy who lived alone out on 10 acres and didn't back down when someone tried to take what was his. And the message was clear. If you cross that fence, you don't just get caught. You lose everything. So I went back to my quiet life. Back to my coffee on the porch in the mornings. Back to working on small projects around the property. Back to watching the desert come alive in the early light and fade into silence at dusk. I didn't move out here to make enemies. I moved here to disappear. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. But not before I made sure that the people who tried to push me around disappeared first.